Hello, love. Welcome back to Tranquility du Jour, nourishing conversations about living a full and meaningful life with doses of tranquility. This is episode 580. I'm your host, Kimberly Wilson, bringing you tranquility through this medium since 2005. Now, today I wanted to do a little repeat of sorts on mental health awareness. So May is mental health awareness. So inside today's episode, you're going to find tips to help commemorate this month, learn how to make mental health a priority, my go-to coping skills for mind and body, resources, and how to reach out to others who may be struggling. I also have a worksheet for you to download and take notes, and 4 journal prompts. Now, before we dive in and I share a bit about upcoming events and whatnot, I just want to say thank you for your patience. My podcast is a week delayed. After 3 months of renovation, last week we were able to move back in, somewhat settle in, clean up all the dust, and slowly unpack. So life has been a little out of sorts, one might say. And so my focus has really been honing in on my clients, the Coterie, and of course, my little petite family of furry friends and Tim. And so anyway, every day, last week, I had on my to-do list podcast, and it was so not a lack of love for getting this out to you. It was just one of those things that just kept slipping. So again, I thank you for your patience, and I hope this will be really informative as you think about all that is happening in the world right now, and also how to really best take care of you. I want to say also a big thank you to everyone who joined the TDJ Style pop-up last Sunday, May 1st. So it was another thing that was going on that was taking a lot of my time and energy. And it was so fun to be with you and to chat style and all of that greatness. And also to, share the ethos of the clothing line and the different ways in which we give back, from the compostable mailers, which actually the mailers even say this is worm food, and, the different charities that we donate to, and the eco-friendly fabrics and the local seamstress. So I just want to say a big thank you to everyone who supported, and to also know everything is custom made just for you. So please be patient as my seamstress whirls away on her sewing machine and gets these out your way. So again, a big thank you for your support. Now on May 17th, I am hosting a pet loss support session. So those of you who have lost pets, who have lost beings of any kind, human or furry, and beyond, I just want you to know I understand, and of course everyone's grief is different, but how incredibly challenging pet loss is. And I mean, it's just, I can't even, just like how freaking hard it is. And so every other month or so, I host a free pet loss support session. And you can find out more in the show notes, kimberlywilson.com/580, and there'll be a link to the pet loss support session. It's also in the footer of my website, so you can easily find that web page. But this is happening on May 17th at 7:30. It's about 1 hour, and I give tons and tons of resources, and you have the chance to share your pet story if you'd like. And again, just ways to kind of process this deep loss. Mid-year virtual retreat. A big thank you to those of you who joined me for April's, which was the spring one. So much fun to be together, and I left feeling just so rejuvenated, and I hope you did too. And the next one is mid-year. So of course we're going to be thinking about everything that's happened so far this year, and then what lies ahead for 2022. And that's happening on July 9th from 2 to 4 p.m. So just a couple weeks before I get my new hip. I get a new hip on July 22nd. So I will look forward to being with you for this virtual retreat. And then finally, the Coterie Waitlist. So the Coterie is my annual program, and this opens late 2022. And so be sure to hop on the waitlist so you're the first to know when it opens up. All right, so mental health awareness. So what I want to kind of start with is the importance of making your mental health a priority. Now, you probably are fully aware of this being important and it also being a priority. I think it's something that people have been quite mindful of during the pandemic. And yet, also it's one of those things that can sometimes be the last to get attention because we're busy knocking other things off of our to-do list. So a few ideas on how to make your mental health a priority. Now, one of the biggest things, which again is easily overlooked because we're a society that values doing, is the importance of sleep. All right, so sleep is so critical to our well-being. And it's interesting, I read some study just over the weekend that was talking about how lack of sleep has actually been linked to dementia, which I thought was really interesting. And so it's like, get those Z's because it's really important for our mental kind of cognitive abilities, even as we age. So check in, notice, how is your sleep? Are you getting enough? There are many apps that you can use to track it if you're not sure. You feel like, I sleep, but I wake up, I'm still exhausted. So you can notice and pay attention to and track, how's my sleep going? Am I getting enough? Do I have a sleep deficit? How can I make this a priority? The other thing, of course, is physical activity. Ideally, at least 30 minutes of physical activity a day. This could be walking. This could be ballet, right? It's something that I'm super passionate about right now. It could be yoga. It could be running, biking. Whatever it is, just making sure that at least 30 minutes a day is happening for you. Now, some people will even say 20 minutes of elevated heart rate. For some of us, that may not happen. But if you can just get that body moving at least 30 minutes a day, it's really helpful, for tension releasing, and then also just for overall maintenance. Food. Okay, so this is important. Of course, we know we need to eat, but are we eating the right foods? And as I was researching and pulling some things together for today's podcast, one of the things that kept coming up is curbing sugar intake, which I was like, because those of you who have listened to the podcast or know me know that is like something that I struggle with. I love sugar. And so I have to really, really work to try to reduce that. And so, that's one of the things that's definitely encouraged is that we reduce sugar intake. Also that we focus, of course, on whole foods. And, also when we think about food, it's okay, what else are we ingesting? And definitely trying to cut back or cut out alcohol. The reason being, since it's a depressant, that is not necessarily helpful for our mental health. Now, of course, glasses of wine here and there or whatever it may be that you may enjoy, totally fine. We just want to make sure that we're not using it to escape reality in a negative way. And what I mean by that, I'm going to share some ideas on ways to kind of quote unquote escape reality in healthier ways, right? And alcohol or drugs or even like an overly excessive intake of caffeine is not necessarily as useful or helpful for our mental health. And of course, mindfulness, and we talk a lot about this in Tranquility du Jour, but this idea of being present, being in the moment, paying attention so that we are responding versus reacting. And that means when we're triggered, we get that annoying email or we get that frustrating text message or we get, something that just feels curt or insensitive. It's like, okay, how can we respond to this in a way that is not reactive? And, the thing that really helps with that, I love to share this acronym that I've been taught in the mindfulness world, and it's STOP, S-T-O-P. Of course, S stands for stop, T, take a breath, right? That nice, juicy inhale, exhale. O, observe what's happening. Ooh, my pulse is going up. My face feels flushed. I'm hot. It's like you just notice, like physically, mentally, emotionally, what is happening for you. And then P, proceed with awareness. So becoming more mindful about what our triggers are can be very helpful with regard to our mental health. Of course, play is important here. As adults, we often do not give ourselves the opportunity to play, to laugh, to have fun, to enjoy, to kind of embody that childlike wonder. What would it take to get back in touch with that for you? Okay, talking to someone when you need support, kind of asking for that, reaching out, processing your feelings. So talking through what you're dealing with is so important. Now that can of course be done in a journal. It can be done with a trusted companion, or it can be done with a professional. Another thing that can be really helpful for our mental health and making it a priority is creating routines so that we have certain things that we do in the mornings, that we do in the evenings, that we do in the weekdays, that we do in the weekday evenings, that we do on the weekends, right? So what are those for you? Certain routines. They don't have to be long, but they're just things that are a part of your regular life. Now, the thing with this that I also want to counter with routines is to also encourage you to shake them up, because sometimes we can get into habits where we're like, it's time to do this now, it's time to do that. And, instead of it being like, it's great because it reduces decision fatigue, like, I don't have to think about what am I going to wear or what am I going to eat? Like I just have a routine, or what am I going to do on Saturday morning? I have a routine. Sometimes too, if we find ourselves feeling a little like, not excited about a routine, it can be important to shake it up. So a small example, say for me, I have to walk my dogs multiple times a day, right? So what if instead of going the same way every time, I go a different route? I'll tell you, I did that last week. And what was interesting is there was this whole kind of beautiful garden filled with all these flowers that I had missed because I had not been down that way in a few weeks. And it's a small thing, but I was like blown away with the color. There were peonies. Oh my gosh, peonies in the wild. Those of you who follow me on Instagram, you probably saw them in my Instagram stories because I was so excited. But I had missed those for a few weeks because I'd been going the same route every day. So a small example, but recognizing how even those things we do every day, how can we shake them up? Maybe you always have hot tea in the morning. Well, what about adding some ice cubes once it's brewed, right? So just little things. So making your mental health a priority. All right, so a couple other things I want to share is coping skills. So coming up with coping skills or coping strategies that help you when you feel strong emotions, such as anger, anxiety, depression, stress, all that stuff that is part of life. How can we become more resilient, more stress tolerant, more compassionate towards ourselves and others? So a few things that can be really helpful distractions. Again, you remember I said earlier about having healthy distractions. So sometimes our minds are on loop, just replaying that darn email we received that we are still a little upset about, or, rereading something, or kind of rehashing a decision, and you're just on loop. So things that can be helpful is to healthily distract yourself by writing, by going on a walk, by watching a show, playing a game, reading, going for a drive or a hike, something that just allows you to do something different to shift your mind. Doing a puzzle, right? Taking an online course where you are learning to watercolor, something that is just going to focus your mind to get you out of that loop. Now, another idea that might be helpful as we think about coping strategies is interpersonal strategies. So, whenever we need to take good care of ourselves. And, it's not so much about a healthy distraction, but kind of interpersonal. One big thing is setting boundaries, right? And saying no. I like to say, no, thank you, right? Versus just no. But no, thank you. Unfortunately, I can't add that to my plate right now, or I'm not able to do that for you at this moment, or I don't have the energy for that. So recognizing the importance of that as a coping strategy. Also for, caring for others and playing with others. So such as a pet, that's very helpful. A developmental way of enhancing our interpersonal skills. Being assertive. And what I mean by that is practicing assertive communication, right? So there's passive assertive and aggressive. How can you assertively say, no, thank you, right? Or asking for what it is you need, getting clear on what it is you need. So those are some ideas on interpersonal coping skills, even encouraging others, right? So supporting and nurturing others. Now, if you want to think about this also from a physical, so I talked about those a little bit earlier and making your own mental health a priority, but the importance of sleep, food, routine, exercise, mindfulness, limiting, mind-altering things like caffeine, alcohol, drugs, etc., and really, really moving that body. Now, if you want to think about also some cognitive, some mental coping skills, I like to think about, for me, making a list of goals. What are my goals for this month? What are my goals for this quarter? What are my most important tasks, my MITs for this week? How can I take a class? Now, I will say, I have a problem with this and the fact that I tend to buy way more e-courses than I could possibly consume. Matter of fact, I realized that last November, I bought a 30 credit, CEU credit, therapy e-course. That has been on my to-do list, and I write it every week. Okay, I'm going to start this. Now, I haven't started it yet, although I do have it pulled up in my browser. But the thing is, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's 30 hours, right? How do I find 30 hours? Well, it's like the same saying, which I don't love this saying, but how do you eat an elephant, right? And it's one bite at a time, although we would never eat an elephant. But the idea is how do you tackle a big thing? Okay, one piece at a time. So my goal this week is 1 to 2 hours of this 30-hour course to just dive in. So I just want to precaution, this whole idea of taking a class, because you can become obsessed as I am with taking classes, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I have a backup of e-courses. But that is one way from a coping strategy to keep that mind active, learning new things. Being flexible, right? There's so many ways in which life throws a curveball, which of course we have felt and received over this past year plus with COVID. But how to be more flexible and recognize, sometimes we just have to be malleable and shift and recognize what is it we have control over. So whenever I think of coping skills or strategies, it comes down to these healthy distractions, mental, caring for our mind, physical, caring for our body, and interpersonal, caring for our relationships. And not even just relationships with other humans, but also beings, right? So animals, the environment, thinking about all the ways in which we are interconnected. And how can we use these ways as coping skills for ourselves and then also for others? Another idea around kind of Mental Health Awareness Month is sharing resources. So sharing your mental health story. One of the things I'm talking about in the memoir I'm writing is being diagnosed with major depressive disorder after the death of my beloved pug, Louie, in 2015. And before that, I had lost my firstborn cat, Bernard, who I was equally, well, maybe not equally, but pretty obsessed with. And then 2012 was my grandmother, who is 99.5, but still too young. And, so it was boom, boom, boom. And then 2017, sold my studio, right? So which was also my baby of 18 years.
So there's 4 kind of different types of losses, all within a matter of, what is that, 12 to 17? That's in 5 years, right? So, kind of sharing struggles with that, anxieties, pieces that come with it. So there is something that's important in sharing your story. I'm actually reading a book right now called Writing as a Way of Healing. So sharing your story, it could be, of course, like sharing it with others, or sharing it with a therapist. It could be sharing it with friends. It could be sharing it in a blog. But I love this idea of writing as a way of healing. And if you're curious about this, the author is Louise De Salvo. And then she also references a lot about James Pennebaker's work, who you've probably heard me reference quite a bit. He is a PhD, Dr. Pennebaker, who has written a lot about writing as a form of healing. Volunteering. So whenever I say this, there are many, many ways in which, like in college, I volunteered for the crisis line. And, so there's many ways that we can do things like this. One thing I want to mention, actually next week, I'm hosting a pet loss support group, a free event that I host every other month. And again, it's free and would love to have you if anyone's interested or kind of dealing with this. And sometimes people come who haven't yet lost their pet, but they know that it's on the horizon and they want to prepare. So if you're interested, I'm going to have a link to that in the show notes. There's hotlines, so sharing these, suicide prevention hotlines, domestic violence hotlines, rape hotlines, like all sorts of ways in which you can help be an advocate or a voice. And then, of course, donating. There's so many beautiful causes out there that help support mental health that, again, if that resonates with you, getting involved and supporting. And then the last piece I want to mention as we talk about making mental health a priority is reaching out to others. So what I mean by that is like reaching out to others and saying like, hey, how are you? No, like really, how are you? Over the past few months, I have heard of 3 people who have committed suicide that was completely unexpected and really didn't even give signs or indications that they were struggling. And so, it's heartbreaking, right? It's heartbreaking for those who deal with the loss, try to, understand what happened. What did I miss? Where do I go from here when my, partner, my loved one is no longer with me? And so really, I think it's so important that we get comfortable with asking the questions. Are you okay? Is there anything I can do for you? I want to know what's going on. I care about you. I'm having trouble reaching you. Do you need anything? So it's like also asking if somebody's recently been diagnosed with depression or, is struggling in some way. How's your treatment going? Do you have the resources you need? How can I best support you? So, sometimes it's just reaching out to someone and being like, hey, I'm thinking about you. Being kind and compassionate, right? We never know what someone else is dealing with. And so these are some ways in which we can help make a difference in someone else's life who is struggling. And again, sometimes we never know that this person is struggling until it's too late. And I don't say that, of course, to scare anyone, but just as a reminder that it's really, we never know what's going on in someone else's life. So it's like, A, how can we be as kind and compassionate as possible? And then B, how can we reach out and keep those connections that are important to us? Because people need a little extra love now, I think more than ever. And with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, how can we make it not just a priority for ourselves, but also nurture and support others? Now, in the show notes, I also have a link to a May is Mental Health Month toolkit. And this I pulled off a website from MHA, Mental Health America, national.org. Okay, and I'll have a link to this, of course, in the show notes. But I wanted to provide that with you because it's filled with some really great stuff. In it, you will find, my goodness, in the back, there's all these worksheets, such as dealing with worst case scenario, managing frustration and anger, processing trauma and stress, tips for taking care of yourself, all that good stuff. Again, a lot of the things that I spoke about today. And also tips for processing change, right? Because, what is constant in our lives? Well, it's change. And so how can we get more comfortable with that? Because humans, we do not like change. There's even some tips for coping with anger and frustration. Anyway, there is a lot of really good stuff. I love this workbook that's been put together, or toolkit is what they call it. So again, you'll find a link to that in the show note.
So, mentioned in the show, there is a worksheet for you to download and the 4 journal prompts that I want to encourage you to do some thinking about are: number 1, how can I take care of myself right now, in this moment? Maybe even a few action steps for the week ahead. Number 2, what most needs attention? Number 3, how can I stay connected to what matters most? Number 4, what coping skills would support me most right now? And then I also have just a mentioning of the various tips that are shared in this podcast, from ways to make your mental health a priority, various coping skills, resources, and then reaching out to others. Then there's also a link to May's Mental Health Month toolkit, which is put out by an organization in Virginia, and it's just so beautifully done every year. So I wanted to share that with you. And what's funny is I was skimming through it and I saw that the executive director there she's so great, Schroeder Stribling, and she was the executive director at In Street Village when I did my social work internship there in, was that 2010? So a long time ago. Anyway, so I was delighted to see that she's here because this organization just seems so fabulous. So be sure to check it out. And then finally, let's stay connected. If you have not signed up for Love Notes, please do so. And the great thing is it gives you access to a micro course on the TDJ tenets and gives you invites, inspiration, and more. And these come out weekly to every other week. A link to my 6 books. A link to my 6 books and planner, plus the clothing line. Then also a link to follow along on Instagram and YouTube, where I share many mental health tips and ideas and tools. And then also, if you have a moment to share a review of this podcast on Apple Podcasts, would be so grateful. There's a link to do so. And then, of course, you can find out kind of a breakdown on how to do it at KimberlyWilson.com/podcasts. And then also on Amazon or Goodreads, if you'll leave a review of any of my books, would be so grateful. And send me a screenshot of it, and I will gladly send you a little snail mail love note. All right, thank you as always for tuning in, and I wish you an amazing week ahead. Namaste.